The NFC East is one of the most talented and heated divisions in the NFL. Today we are going to be looking at every position group and ranking all four teams and how they look at each position group. Starting with the quarterback position, we are going to go with the Eagles at number 1 for the quarterback position. I think Jalen Hurts took a huge step last year, both as a runner and a passer. He is really proven to be one of the best quarterbacks in the NFL. He played fantastically in the Super Bowl, and I definitely think that he deserves that number 1 spot for the Eagles. At number 2, I am going to go with the Cowboys, Dak Prescott. I think Prescott is a bit overhated at times. I do think that sometimes he does turn the ball over. He did have a lot of interceptions last year, but I don't think that that is a trend over the course of his career. I think he's an accurate player. I think he's a winner. I don't know that he is a true elevator when it comes to really making his team better, but I think he is definitely one of the better quarterbacks in the league, and I do think he gets overhated a bit. Moving next to the New York Giants, I'm not overly convinced that Daniel Jones is worth, what they paid him or that he's a franchise-level quarterback, but I do think that Brian Daboll did a really good job putting him in a great situation to be successful. And I think Jones did a very good job, a very admirable job operating that offense as he was asked to do so. And I do think that with his running ability, he does have a decent floor at this point. Now that he's cut down the turnovers and not become a turnover machine, I do think that he does provide some nice things to the offense, especially on the ground. But I do think he's got a good arm and is a good passer as well. And finally, the Commanders at number 4, it absolutely has to be them here. Sam Howell really didn't play much at all last year. When he did, he looked all right, but I don't think you can rely on a 5th-round pick to be a strong starting quarterback in just his second year. You also have Jacoby Brissett, who I did think played well in his time for Deshaun Watson in Cleveland, but I don't think that that's going to be a very high-end quarterback room, to be honest. It is moving on from Carson Wentz. I completely understand that decision, but I think they're very clearly in the 4 slot in the NFC East. At the running back position, I am going to put the Giants at number 1. It was the revitalization of Saquon Barkley last year. He looked healthy. He looked very dynamic and was just one of the best running backs in the league. That was something that he's dealt with injuries for a long time. We've always known he's been very talented. It's all about can he stay healthy. Last year he did for the most part, and I thought he was one of the best running backs in the NFL. He proved to still be that. It's all just about can he continue to sustain that level of success over the course of another season. I think that he has all the tools to do it. It's just about the health. And for that, I do think there could be arguments for other players at number 1, other teams at number 1, but based on pure talent, based on what they showed last year, Saquon Barkley has to be in this 1 slot. Moving to number 2, I am going to go with the Cowboys. They fully transitioned away from Ezekiel Elliott last year and to Tony Pollard, who absolutely blew up and was one of the better young running backs in the NFL. He did get franchise tagged, is coming off of an injury, so I think there is going to be some uncertainty there as far as is he going to be fully healthy? Is he going to be somebody that holds out due to that franchise tag? So I'll be very interested to see what happens with Tony Pollard, but he was fantastic last season, and I really, really like what they have at running back. Moving to number 3, I am going to have the Commanders. I thought they did a very good job integrating Brian Robinson into the offense. I thought he had a very productive season. Antonio Gibson has always kind of been, I think, better suited to be a number 2 back, and he is kind of able to take that reins of being that complementary back now at this point, with Robinson being the 1A, and I think it suits both of them a lot better that way. Brian Robinson isn't necessarily expected to be a bell cow back. He can fight for the tough yards in between the tackles, and then you have Gibson to come on, be a pass catcher, be a nice complementary piece to him. I like that 1-2 duo, and that's going to leave the Philadelphia Eagles at number 4. You lost Miles Sanders. I did think that Sanders was a product a little bit of the system within Philadelphia, but playing behind a great offensive line with a really strong running game that had the quarterback multiplier in it, but I do think that he was a piece that they lost. They have replaced him, but just with a lot of uncertainty. DeAndre Swift they traded for. Thought that was a good trade. I think he brings a lot of upside. Never really kind of found his role within Detroit, and they choose to move on and draft Jahmyr Gibbs. I definitely think he could revitalize his career in Philadelphia. They also have some other players like Rashad Penny. When he is healthy, he's one of the most efficient running backs in the NFL. It's just about staying healthy and being able to sustain that workload over a full 17-game season. He hasn't really proven that he can can do that, but I do think that between the two of them, they probably will get decent running back play behind a really good offensive line with a really good scheme. So I do think that they may be a productive unit, and that might make this fourth ranking look a bit silly, but I think based on pure talent, they do have the number 4 running back room in the NFC East. But moving to the wide receiver, that is the complete opposite. They are number 1. A.J. Brown absolutely burst onto the scene. He was already a very good receiver in Tennessee, but he found a new level with Philadelphia last year, being that true dominant X-receiver that Jalen Hurts trusts to go up and get it on go balls. He was really, really good in that regard. Devontae Smith, one of the best wide receiver 2s in the NFL. They also have some other nice pieces as depth as well. I think they are very clearly number 1. Then number 2, I am going to go with the Dallas Cowboys. CeeDee Lamb has really emerged as one of the better wide receivers in the NFL as well. I think Lamb is a very good player. The trade for Brandon Cooks, I think that he's been insanely productive with a really bad cast of quarterbacks over a long career. So I definitely think Dak is one of the better quarterbacks he's played with. I do expect him to have some good production. And then you've also got Michael Gallup and some other guys that you've drafted, Jalen Tolbert. And so I think they have some really nice pieces, some good depth, really good high-end play as well. So they definitely deserve that number 2 spot. At number 3, I'm going to go with the Washington Commanders. Terry McLaurin is an absolute beast. I love what he does. He's really good when it comes to ball tracking, ball winning. He's a good route runner. You also bring in Jahan Dotson, who I thought quietly had a very good rookie season. He kind of got overshadowed by a lot of the other young wide receivers, but I thought Dotson played really well when he was out there and kind of had good quarterback play. I thought he showed some really nice things. I do think he may get held back by Sam Howell or Jacoby Brissett at quarterback this year, but I do overall like what they have at that wide receiver slot. And then at number 4, the Giants, they just have a lot of bodies there at this point. Doesn't mean that they aren't going to find somebody to kind of take over and be a nice wide receiver 1. You have Isaiah Hodgins, you drafted Jalen Hyatt, you have Sterling Shepard, you have just a lot of guys that haven't proven to stay healthy, that haven't proven that they deserve a big contract. And just a lot of uncertainty there. No guys that really stick out as a true wide receiver 1. And in a division full of really good wide receivers, I think they clearly are in that number 4 slot. Moving to tight end, I'm going to go with the Eagles at number 1. I think Dallas Goedert is awesome. He is very, very good both in the passing game and the running game. They also have Grant Calcaterra, who I was big on a few years ago. I think that he is somebody that can be a nice piece for them. Just a big fan of what the Eagles have in that tight end room, and I definitely think they deserve that number 1 slot. At number 2, I am going to go with the New York Giants. You traded for Darren Waller. I thought that was a really good deal. When he is healthy, he's been one of the better tight ends in the NFL, moving away from the Raiders. I really like that, and I'm excited to see what Brian Daboll can do with him at that tight end spot. I thought Daniel Bellinger played pretty well for a late, day 3 pick out of San Diego State last year. I thought he showed some really nice things in a room that, he had a lot of opportunities. I think he's better suited to be a tight end 2, which he now has the chance to be, but I really like what he can be as a tight end 2. You've got, hopefully, Waller as your 1A receiving option, and the Giants have a very nice tight end room as well. Then we're going to go to the Washington Commanders. Logan Thomas really kind of it at that tight end spot. I do think the Cowboys could be interchanged with them. They just have a lot of young, unproven playmakers at that position as well. Jake Ferguson out of Wisconsin. A couple of other guys, Peyton Hendershot as well. For the Commanders, it's pretty much Logan Thomas. I think he's probably the best of the 3 of those guys, but he's often injured. I think those are completely interchangeable, but I do think Logan Thomas has proven a bit more at the pro level, which is why I lean with him at number 3 and some of the young guys the Cowboys have at number 4, though I do think they have some upside and some ability to definitely overtake Washington in that spot. At the offensive line position, it's got to be Philadelphia at number 1. They've kind of had the number 1 line as a consensus for a while at this point. Jason Kelce, you of course have Mailata, who has turned into a great left tackle. Lane Johnson is one of the best right tackles in the league. Landon Dickerson's playing left guard. You did lose your starting right guard to free agency, but I do expect that they are going to fill that spot relatively well. I really like Cam Jurgens as well as a depth piece or potential right guard, so I think they are very clearly number 1. But I do like what the Cowboys have as well on the offensive line. I think Tyler Smith played really well at left tackle last year. You're going to kick him back into guard now that Tyron Smith is back, but Zach Martin's still one of the best guards in the league. Tyler Biadasz, still a solid center. Terrence Steele at that right tackle spot is maybe the only somewhat questioned, but I think that overall this is a very, very good offensive line group and probably a top 10 unit in the NFL. Next, we are going to go to the New York Giants. Really like the tackles that the Giants have. Andrew Thomas and Evan Neal. I think it's going to be one of the best young duos. Evan Neal struggled a bit as a rookie on that right side, but I think he is going to figure it out. Andrew Thomas has really become one of the premier tackles in the NFL. The offensive line in the interior is still a bit shaky. They're still trying to figure out kind of who's going to play those spots, but Glowinski is there. John Michael Schmitz I thought was a great pick, and I definitely think that they deserve that number 3 spot, and that leaves the Commanders at number 4. Just not a lot of exciting pieces for the Commanders, to be honest, at that offensive line spot. You paid Andrew Wiley to come in and be a right tackle. I don't think he's been great, but he's fine. Charles Leno has played left tackle at a fine rate for a long time. You trusted a lot of youth on the interior. Nick Gates has often been injured. Sadiq Charles and Sam Cosmi are young players, so maybe they figure it out. Maybe this is a decent unit, but I wouldn't bet on it to be better than the other units in the NFC East, and I think that's why they are in that number 4 slot. Next up, the edge rusher position on defense. I am going to go with the Cowboys at number 1. Micah Parsons, absolutely one of the best young edge defenders in the NFL, one of the best edge defenders, period, in the NFL, and he is just such a chess piece. He's such a dominant weapon. You could categorize him as a linebacker. I'm categorizing him as an edge. I just think that he can truly wreak havoc off the edge. Sam Williams showed some nice things. You, of course, got DeMarcus Lawrence at that other edge spot, so I definitely think that they deserve the 1 spot here. But next, we are going to go with the Commanders next. I think that Chase Young still has some juice left. I'm still a believer that he still has a lot of talent once he gets healthy, once he fully gets over that injury. Of course, you've still got Sweat on the edge as well. I definitely think this is a very talented duo. You've just got to get the most out of those guys. Then the Eagles at number 3. Brandon Graham, Hassan Reddick, some other really, really good players. You obviously drafted Nolan Smith at the end of the first round this year. I definitely think that the Eagles have a lot of talent at that edge rusher position. Overall, I still do think that the Cowboys and Commanders do have some better pieces at that spot, and that's going to leave the Giants at number 4. Though I like some of what they have. Kayvon Thibodeau, Azeez Ojulari, some really nice pieces, to be honest, on that Giants defensive line. This is one of the most impressive defensive line divisions that I have seen, both at the interior spot and the edge spot. This Giants edge unit is no slouch, and I definitely think that they would not be in the 4 slot in most divisions. Just John Allen, De'Aaron Payne, some of the best defensive tackles in the NFL. Payne is one of the best nose tackles in the league, and he got paid like it. And I think John Allen is a very, very nice piece as well. I think they truly have one of the best interior defensive lines in the NFL, and definitely in the NFC East as well. Next, I'm going to go with the Giants at number 2. And I do think the Eagles is completely debatable to put there as well. But for the Giants, Dexter Lawrence was probably the best defensive tackle in the NFL last year. Better than Aaron Donald, better than really anyone. And so that is really why they get that slot. You also have Leonard Williams. There's not a ton beyond those guys, but Dexter Lawrence is one of the best, if not the best defensive tackle currently in the NFL, and so I definitely think that they deserve that 2 slot. The Eagles have a ton of really nice pieces, but I don't think they have any superstars at this point. Fletcher Cox has probably reached his pinnacle and is descending at this point. You also have Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter, of course. I think both of those guys are going to be very, very good players for him. And I would fully expect this to be one of the best interior defensive lines in the league as well. I would say that all 3 of these are top 10 units in the entire league. It just so happens they're all in the same division, and that leaves the Cowboys at number 4. You draft Mozzie Smith to hopefully kind of become a better unit on the inside, but this has been a problem for them over the past few years. You have Jonathan Hankins, Osa Adigizua. You also have some pieces like Neville Gallimore. A lot of those guys just haven't worked out as they had hoped, and so we'll see how Mozzie Smith turns out, but I do think they're very clearly number 4 in a division that has great interior defensive line players. Then at the linebacker slot, this was one of the worst groups in the NFL. All 4 of these teams are really, really bad. I'm not counting Micah Parsons or a lot of the outside linebackers as linebackers in this case. This is true off-ball linebackers, and there's just not very many good ones in this NFC East. The Commanders have Jamin Davis, who they drafted super high just not too long ago. You also have Cody Barton. You have David Mayo. Nothing that's really exciting by any means, but at least Jamin Davis has some upside. He has the talent to be a really solid linebacker. At number 2, I am going to go with the Giants. I like Bobby Okereke. I think that he was a nice signing for them in free agency. Pretty much nothing else at that linebacker slot. You have Darian Beavers, who is a late pick out of Cincinnati, potentially slated to start. You also have Carter Coughlin, Gerard Davis, just nothing that is really exciting at that linebacker slot. And then we're going to go with the Cowboys up next. Leighton Vander Esch has been a decent player at times, and I do think that, when healthy, he is potentially the best linebacker on this list, but that has just been a massive problem for him over the years. Behind him, Damone Clark is an interesting piece, dealt with injuries in college, and maybe he can turn into a piece, but besides that, DeMarvion Overshown was a pick this year that maybe turns into something, just not super exciting. And then the Eagles at number 4. They have never really invested super heavily in this position, but they did lose TJ Edwards, and I just don't think they have a lot here. Nicholas Morrow, who started a lot for the Bears, was not very good. You also have Nakobe Dean, of course. They are hoping he takes a big stride. I do think that he was a bit limited when it came to his size and some of his athletic abilities in Georgia. I wasn't the biggest Nakobe Dean fan, but I do think that he has some potential. He's just got to show it, and he's got to stay healthy, which is why he fell in the first place in the draft. Behind them, nothing much at all. This is a completely terrible linebacker division. I think you could flip it and make the argument, but really all 4 of these units would be bottom 10 units in the NFL, and it's not very strong part of this division. Moving to the cornerback position, I am going to go with the Eagles at number 1. You have Darius Slay and James Bradbury. Both played like top 10 corners last year, bringing both of them back, which was a bit of a surprise. A lot of people thought they would lose at least one of them. They were able to retain them both, and that is huge for this defense. You also have Avonte Maddox, who is a very solid slot corner as well. Drafted Keely Ringo late in the draft, who I do think has some upside. I do think that was more appropriate for where he should have been drafted, but I definitely like the traits that he brings, and that's going to put the Eagles at number 1. The Cowboys at number 2, Trayvon Diggs is a very boomer bust type of corner. He gets a lot of turnovers. He gives up a decent bit of yards as well, but oftentimes you live with that because the turnovers are so valuable. You also bring in Stephon Gilmore, who was great for the Colts just last season, and I think that was a huge upgrade. You also have Jordan Lewis. You also have Kelly's pieces in that corner room. That's going to put the Giants at number 3. I really like what they have in Deonte Banks, who they drafted in the first round in this draft. I think he was a great press man, super athletic corner that can be a true corner 1 at the NFL level. You also have Adoree Jackson, who is a nice player as well. I think he's well suited to be a corner 2 in the NFL, and potentially he can be that now with Deonte Banks in that room. You also have some other interesting slot options. You have Aaron Robinson, Cordell Flott, you have Darnay Holmes. So I think all those guys can combine to potentially give you some solid cornerback play in that slot position. And I think this is a very solid corner room for the Giants, and that leaves number 4, the Washington Commanders. Kendall Fuller is really the only established starter there. Emmanuel Forbes they brought in. I liked Forbes, but I did think he was a bit overdrafted at 16 overall this year. He's a playmaker. He has a lot of ability to turn plays into interceptions, to be a real difference maker on the defensive side of the ball. But I do think he will have some difficulties just playing at that size in the NFL. I do think he needs to bulk up, and I will be curious to see if they are able to do that. Not a ton behind him at that corner slot, so I do think that is why the Commanders are going to be at number 4. Then for the safety room, I'm going to go with the Cowboys at number 1. Donovan Wilson, Jaron Kearse, both very underrated safeties. Malik Hooker there as well. I think this is one of the more underrated safety rooms in the entire league. Donovan Wilson really good coming up, being a good run-stuffing player, and you've also got some of that ball-hawking ability from Hooker. Kearse is kind of a do-it-all Swiss Army knife as well, so that's going to put them in the number 1 slot. Then I'm going to go with the Giants. I think Xavier McKinney is a great player. He did have a bit of a down year last year. I think a lot of that was due to injuries, but I think overall he is a very, very nice player for this Giants defense, and I do think that there's just not a whole lot of established guys for both the Eagles and the Commanders, who we will talk about. I think McKinney might be the best safety in this division. It's certainly up there with some of those guys in Dallas. You also have Dane Belton. You have a couple of other guys in that safety room that you are hoping that can potentially take that next step. Bobby McCain came over from Washington as well. So very interested to see who starts for the Giants. Then we are going to go with the Commanders at number 3. Cam Curl has plateaued a bit after a really strong rookie year. You bring in Jartavius Martin to potentially complement him, get the most out of both of those guys. I think Curl has proven to be a solid NFL starter, which I don't think is something that necessarily the Eagles do have on their current roster, and I really like the upside of Jartavius Martin. We do have the Eagles, though, finally at number 4. You bring in Sidney Brown, who I think was a fun pick out of Illinois, could potentially be a very nice fit there in that defense. Besides them, you've got Reed Blankenship, who played well in sparing action last year, but a lot of that was just due to injuries, and we'll see if that was a sample size. But then you also have Edmonds, who you brought over from Pittsburgh. Don't think he has been a great player throughout the duration of his career, but still some interesting pieces for this Eagles team, and I do think that they are going to be in that number 4 slot for now until they prove that they can have an established NFL starter like the other 3 teams in the division above them. That's going to do it for my NFC East positional power rankings. Let me know what should be different. Let me know how I did in the comments below. If you like this kind of content, please hit that subscribe and like button as well. It would truly help me out. Thank you so much for watching. Have a great rest of your day. I'll catch you in the next one.